The next step of urine formation is the tubular reabsorption, or we can call it selective reabsorption also. So we are discussing the second process, that is selective reabsorption. As we discussed in the previous topic, that is the ultrafiltration, that almost 180 liter per day the filtrate is formed. 180 liter per day, that much amount of filtrate is formed through the ultrafiltration, and that amount is very much higher as compared to the urine which is excreted out. Almost 99%, or we can say almost 99% तक जो filtrate है ये form हुआ, it should be reabsorbed, because डिफरेंस बहुत ज्यादा है. 180 लीटर फिल्ट्रेट फॉर्म हो रहा है, यूरिन जो पास आउट हो रहा है दैट इज 1.5 लीटर पर डे है. So it's very less. It means almost 99% substances get reabsorbed to form that much amount of the urine. So how, let's see how this process happens. As the glomerular filtrate is formed, जैसे कि हमने देखा था in the Bowman's capsule, the glomerular filtrate is formed due to the ultrafiltration. Ultrafiltration के बाद जो filtrate form हो रहा है, it comes into the lumen of Bowman's capsule. It comes into the lumen of Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule की lumen के अंदर आएगा, and then it will pass through the next part of the kidney nephron, that is the renal tubule. It passes through the next part of the tubule, that is the first PCT, then DCT, then loop of Henle, then DCT, and all these, and finally through collecting duct. It will pass through the collecting duct. Due to the cause of this movement, as the filtrate moves through this renal tubule part, some substances which need to be utilized by the body, they will be reabsorbed in different regions of the nephron. PCT हो गया, loop of Henle हो गया, DCT हो गया, and collecting duct. जैसे जैसे filtrate इन सब parts से move होता हुआ जाएगा, उन parts में according to the requirements, according to their requirement by the body, they should be reabsorbed. उनका reabsorption होता जाएगा. Okay. Now, what substances are reabsorbed and in which amount they will be reabsorbed by the body? On the basis of this, they are divided into the 3 categories. हमने substances को 3 categories में divide किया है कि वो किस amount में reabsorb होते हैं. First is known as high threshold substances. High threshold substances. High threshold substances are substances which are highly or which are completely reabsorbed. जो filtrate में आ गए थे but they can be reabsorbed completely. So जो completely reabsorbed होने वाले substances है जिनको body की पूरी जरूरत है completely reabsorbed हो जाएंगे, they are known as high threshold substances. और इसके अंदर हमने किनको include किया? What will include here? Here we include the water, glucose, amino acids, vitamins, and we will include the salts like sodium, ions, etc. So these are the substances which has the high threshold substances which are reabsorbed by the body again. Completely they will be reabsorbed. Okay. अब इसके अंदर भी एक चीज है, हमने high तो बोल दिया है कि they are completely reabsorbed, but it should be reabsorbed according to their renal threshold. Renal threshold क्या होता है? Renal threshold is the amount of the substances that the kidney can reabsorb. If the upper or maximum of this renal threshold is present, any substance is present maximum to this renal threshold, it should not be reabsorbed. अगर ऐसा होता तो डायबिटिक पेशेंट जो है उनके यूरिन में ग्लूकोज की प्रेजेंस कभी नहीं मिलती. तो इसे समझाने के लिए एक एग्जांपल से बताती हूँ कि क्या हो रहा है यहाँ पे. हाउ वी कैन कॉलिंग इट लाइक ग्लूकोज का अगर हम एग्जांपल लें, ग्लूकोज इज रीअब्सॉर्ब, वी आर कॉलिंग इट दैट इज कंप्लीटली रीअब्सॉर्ब. इट कैन बी कंप्लीटली रीअब्सॉर्ब, बट यहाँ पे जो किडनी के लिए इसकी कंप्लीटली रीअब्सॉर्प्शन करने के लिए एक लिमिट है. दैट लिमिट इज नोन एज रीनल थ्रेशोल्ड. सो 180 mg per 100 ml, दिस इज द रीनल थ्रेशोल्ड फॉर द किडनी. मीन्स इतने अमाउंट में ग्लूकोज प्रेजेंट होगा तो किडनी से कंप्लीटली अब्सॉर्ब कर लेगी. बट सपोज द पर्सन हैज द मीन्स एक्सेस अमाउंट ऑफ द ग्लूकोज एक्सेप्ट दिस वन. अगर 180 mg per 100 ml से ज्यादा अमाउंट में ग्लूकोज प्रेजेंट है, so it will not be completely reabsorbed. It will be excreted. The excess amount जो excess होगा, it will be released out through the urine. So that is about the renal threshold, and almost all these substances which we have written here like glucose, water, amino acid, vitamins and salts, they are highly reabsorbed. They are completely reabsorbed. Second category of these substances, इस तरह की substances की second category है, that is the low threshold substances. We are calling low threshold substances. Low threshold जिनका कंप्लीट रीअब्जॉर्प्शन नहीं होता बट ऑलमोस्ट दे कैन बी रीअब्जॉर्ब्ड. सो इस कैटेगरी में हम इंक्लूड करते हैं लो थ्रेशोल्ड सब्सटेंसेस में इंक्लूड है यूरिया एंड यूरिक एसिड. यूरिया and uric acids, they are included in this category of low threshold substances. And the third category is known as non-threshold. Non-threshold means they are threshold substances, means they do not reabsorb at all. फिल्ट्रेट में आ गए हैं तो ये बिल्कुल भी अब्सॉर्ब नहीं होंगे, दे विल रिलीज्ड विद द यूरिन फ्रॉम द बॉडी, तो ये दोबारा इनका अब्सॉर्प्शन नहीं हो रहा. हियर वी आर इंक्लूडिंग द हेपरिक एसिड and creatinine. These are they have the low non-threshold substances. They will not reabsorb again into the body. They will excrete it out. So these are the three categories of the substances on the basis of their reabsorption. If they are completely reabsorbed, we call it high threshold substances. If they are not completely absorbed but maximum amount of these will be reabsorbed, then we call it low threshold substances. And the substances will do not reabsorbed by the renal tubule part, then we call it non-threshold substances. Now let's see how these reabsorption will happen. As I told you that this reabsorption occur in the different parts of the renal tubule. Renal tubule के अलग-अलग पार्ट में अलग-अलग तरीके से reabsorption हो रहा है. किस पार्ट में किसका reabsorption होगा, अब हम उसके बारे में बात करते हैं. How the reabsorption happens in the different parts of the renal tubule. So as the filtrate comes into the lumen of Bowman's capsules, it's moved downwards into the renal tubule parts, and as it's moved into the different parts, the compositions, the osmotic pressure and the pH of this filtrate get changed. और याद रखिएगा इसे हम filtrate ही बोल रहे हैं, we are not calling it urine because ये अभी urine नहीं है, it's just glomerular filtrate. So as the glomerular filtrate, it comes into the PCT फिल्ट्रेट है. अल्ट्राफिल्ट्रेशन के बाद जो फिल्ट्रेट बना है वो सबसे पहले कौन से रीजन में आएगा? इट कम्स इनटू द PCT रीजन, दैट इज प्रॉक्सिमल कॉन्वोल्यूटिव ट्यूब्यूल. And we know that proximal convoluted tubule is the specialized cells which help in the reabsorption. यहाँ पे जो reabsorption होगा वो होगा specific cells की वजह से. Here the brush border epithelial cuboidal cells, brush border cuboidal cells are present, and these cells have numerous number of mitochondria. उनके अंदर mitochondria भी होते हैं. इससे पहले आपको बता दूं जो reabsorption process है, it can be happen by two ways. दो तरीके से हो सकता है. The process can be happen by active reabsorption or it can be passive. Active में जहाँ पे ATP का utilization हुआ, energy expenditure होगा, that is active. यहाँ पे जो required substances है जिनका high threshold है, अगर उनकी concentration भी कम है तो भी वो actively reabsorbed हो जाएंगे. Whereas the passive reabsorption happens without expenditure of energy. Here substances will be reabsorbed due to the diffusion or osmosis. तो यहाँ पे diffusion और osmosis की वजह से concentration difference होने से reabsorption हो रहा है, energy utilize नहीं हो रही. Whereas in the active reabsorption energy will be utilized. तो यहाँ बात कर रहे हैं PCT की. PCT के अंदर जो mainly important जो substances का absorption हो रहा है वो active absorption होगा because they have large number of mitochondria which can provide energy. So let's see what things get be reabsorbed. तो यहाँ पे जो जो चीजें reabsorbed हो रही हैं उनमें सबसे पहले हम बात करते हैं ग्लूकोज की. The glucose and the amino acids. As we know that these are the high threshold substances and they can be completely reabsorbed into the PCT region. 100% reabsorption होगा and this absorption will be active absorption. So energy को utilize करते हुए completely they can be absorbed. ये फिर से absorb हो जाएंगे. Except these, इसके अलावा salts जो हमने देखे थे, that sodium ion and the chloride ion and potassium ion, they will also reabsorbed into the PCT region, and almost 70 to 75%. Like sodium ion, they get be absorbed up to the 70%. Potassium ion will 75%. Like 70 to 75% तक reabsorption जो हो रहा है इन ions का होगा, and that will be also the active. Sodium and potassium ion का जो absorption है वो active होगा. तो यहाँ हम लिख सकते हैं the sodium ion and the potassium ion, they will be actively reabsorbed. Whereas the chloride ion, they can be reabsorbed by the passive way. They can be passively reabsorbed. According to the concentration gradient, they can be reabsorbed without using the energy. So ये हो गई बात. इसके बाद आता है सबसे important चीज, that is the water. Water will also get reabsorbed here. Water का absorption जो हो रहा है, it happens due to the osmosis, and almost 75% water get reabsorbed into the PCT region. PCT region के अंदर 75% जो water का है reabsorption यहाँ पे हो जाएगा. उसके अलावा देखिए, that is the important things which get be reabsorbed. With besides these, the bicarbonate ions, some amount of bicarbonate ion will also be reabsorbed to maintain the osmotic pressure or the pH of the urine. So वो भी कुछ amount में reabsorb होगा. It depends on to the composition. So these are the substances which get reabsorbed into the PCT region. PCT region के अंदर इतना सब चीजों का reabsorption हो गया है, and the cells which are playing very important role in the reabsorption here, that is the brush border cuboidal epithelial cells which have large number of mitochondria. After PCT, the filtrate will move into the descending limb of loop of Henle. It will move into the descending limb, and we know the descending limb of loop of Henle is permeable to water but impermeable to soil. So in this region only the water get be reabsorbed. यहाँ पे सिर्फ वाटर का ही reabsorption होगा, and almost 5% तक जो water है it get be reabsorbed into the descending limb of loop of Henle. So water का absorption यहाँ पे हो गया. यहाँ तक इतना high amount में water का absorption होने के बाद the filtrate which is moved from here, यहाँ से जब filtrate move हो रहा है it becomes hypertonic because it has salts. यहाँ पे water का absorption हो चुका है, salts but अभी भी present है, so the filtrate will become the hypertonic filtrate here. यहाँ पे filtrate जो है as compared to blood, the composition of the blood we will call it concentration is a hypertonic. Next, the filtrate will move into the ascending limb of the loop of Henle, and ascending limb, we know ascending limb is permeable to ions but impermeable to water. So water absorption यहाँ पे नहीं होगा in the ascending limb. No water will be reabsorbed here. Here the salts get be reabsorbed. So in the ascending limb, the sodium ion, chloride ion, the potassium ion, they will be reabsorbed passively according to the descending limb. यहाँ पे भी passive reabsorption हो रहा है, इनका भी passively reabsorption होगा. So diffusion and osmosis in the ascending limb of loop of Henle. So as these ions get reabsorbed from the filtrate, again the filtrate will become the isotonic. The composition will be isotonic. तो यहाँ आने तक जो filtrate है हमारा वो isotonic हो जाएगा. After that, the filtrate will move into the DCT region, that is the distal convoluted tubule. In the distal convoluted tubules, the ion as well as water, both things can be reabsorbed. So DCT region में किन किन चीजों का absorption हो रहा है, यहाँ हम लिखते हैं. In the distal convoluted tubules, the things which get reabsorbed is the potassium ion, the sodium ion, chloride ion, and the bicarbonate ions will also get reabsorbed, and the water will also get reabsorbed. Water का भी reabsorption होगा. So all these things they get reabsorbed into this DCT region. इनका reabsorption हो गया, water हो गया, ions हो गए हैं, bicarbonate ions भी हो गए हैं. Then filtrate will move into the collecting duct. In the collecting duct, the main reabsorption will be happen is of water. यहाँ पे water का reabsorption होगा, and this water reabsorption will depends on the amount of the hormone that is known as antidiuretic hormone or the vasopressin. So water reabsorption is under the control of vasopressin here, as it's required the maximum amount of the water get be reabsorbed, otherwise it will be released through the body in the form of urine. So water absorption is the maximum thing which happening here. Almost 95% water which is present in this filtrate, it gets reabsorbed into the collecting duct. Besides this, the sodium ions will also reabsorb here. This sodium ions will reabsorb under the control of aldosterone hormone, and here some amount of urea will also be reabsorbed. Urea will also be reabsorbed to maintain the osmotic balance of the body. So this process is known as selective reabsorption. As we have seen कि बहुत सारी चीजें थी जो फिल्टर होके आई थी, that these were present in the glomerular filtrate, but completely they will not reabsorb. Only the selecting substances will be reabsorbed according to their amount which is present into the filtrate and according to the requirement of body. That's why we are calling it selective reabsorption. So after selective reabsorption, as the filtrate move into the renal tubules at the different parts, these different things get be reabsorbed. Some substances will reabsorb 100% by the expenditure of energy, whereas the substances will reabsorb passively. उनका passive reabsorption भी हो जाएगा जहाँ पे energy की जरूरत नहीं हो रही. So as this thing happens here, the filtrate will move besides this. जब ये process हो रही है, besides this, the another process will also happening, that is the tubular secretion, where the some substances which need to be excreted out from the body, they will be poured back into the filtrate through the renal tubules. Renal tubules उन substances को फिर से filtrate में pour करने का काम करेंगे so that they can be released out. That process known as tubular secretion. So now we will discuss the next process. That is the last process of urine formation, tubular secretion. The last step of the urine formation is tubular secretion. Why we are calling it tubular secretion, we will talk about it later on. Tubular secretion is means besides the ultrafiltration हमने जहाँ पे देखा, ultrafiltration is not a selective process, but tubular secretion is the selective process, and mainly the PCT and the DCT, that is proximal convoluted tubule and the distal convoluted tubule, these two parts of the renal tubules, they play a very important role into this process. What happens in this process? In the process, the glandular cells of these regions, they extract the waste from the blood by the peritubular capillaries, and then they pour this waste into the filtrate. That's why here the renal tubules, they are pouring the waste into the filtrate. That's why it is known as tubular secretion. What happened here? In this process, the glandular cells of these regions, they extract the waste from the blood by the peritubular capillaries, and then they pour it or they secrete this waste into the nephric filtrate, the filtrate which is passing through this renal tubule. That's why we are calling it tubular secretion. Let's see what waste they extract from the blood. कौन से waste हैं जो ये extract करके pour कर रही हैं filtrate के अंदर. Here we include the different kinds of waste like uric acid. Uric acid is there. Then hippuric acid, that hydrogen ion, potassium ions, ammonia, and some drugs. If drugs are also present, they will be excreted out. They will be excreted through secreted through the tubular part. So we are calling it tubular secretion. So these are the wastes which are secreted into the filtrate. Let's see what happens during this process. As we know that this is the Bowman's capsule. This is the PCT region, then loop of Henle, and DCT, and then collecting duct. So this is the structure of nephron here, and let's see. As we know that outfront arteriole, it's entering here and then it's leaving out in the form of efferent arteriole. We are not making all the parts. This efferent arteriole is coming down and is make a network of capillaries again. This network of capillaries is known as peritubular capillaries. They make a network of capillaries around the PCT and DCT, which is known as peritubular capillaries. So it will make a network. We are making it little bit so that we can understand the process. So what happening in this process is the filtrate, they are pouring the waste into this filtrate. So let's see what happening. As the filtrate, it's moved into the renal tubules. The substances get reabsorbed. Reabsorption hoga, but besides the reabsorption, some substances can be poured back into the filtrate from the blood. The peritubular capillaries, the capillaries which are present here, these capillaries, they absorb these substances from the blood, and from these peritubular capillaries, these substances, they extracted from the glandular cells of PCT and DCT. These glandular cells of PCT, here we know that they have the glandular cells. These cells, they extract these waste from the peritubular capillaries, and then they pour into this filtrate which is passing through this. यहाँ से जो filtrate pass होके जा रहा है, इस filtrate के अंदर उस waste को release कर रही हैं, secrete कर रही हैं. That's why we are calling it tubular secretion. Different kinds of substances can be released out, and it's required according to the composition की किस तरह के composition urine का बन रहा है, उसके according different substances they can be secreted out. ये जो tubular secretion process है, is not as much important in the case of mammalian kidney. यहाँ पे इसकी इतनी importance नहीं है, but this is the main process of the urine formation in the case of marine fishes, and desert amphibians. इस तरीके की जो एनिमल्स हैं उनके अंदर ट्यूबुलर सिक्रेशन जो प्रोसेस होती है मेन प्रोसेस है, बिकॉज वहाँ पे जो यूरिन फॉर्मेशन है वो बनता ही इसी प्रोसेस की वजह से है. दीज एनिमल्स दे डू नॉट हैव ग्लोमेरुलस, उनके अंदर ग्लोमेरुलस प्रेजेंट नहीं होता. इसकी वजह से जो मेन फिल्ट्रेशन प्रोसेस है वो नहीं हो पा रही, जस्ट ड्यू टू द सिक्रेशन. दीज वेस्ट दे आर रिलीज्ड हियर इनटू द renal tubule. That's why this process is very much important in these animals, but in mammalian kidney this process is not having much more importance. So what is happening and what substances are poured back into the filtrate? Let's see. In the PCT region, when the filtrate is passing through the PCT region, here the hydrogen ion and the ammonia which is present in the blood, it's get be poured back into the blood. तो इसे फिर से इसके लिए हम साइन थोड़ा इस तरीके से यूज करेंगे. ये तो reabsorption का, they get be poured back into the filtrate. So these are the substances, or these are the ions which are poured back or secreted back into the filtrate in the PCT region. As the blood moves into the DCT, DCT के अंदर भी इसी तरीके से कुछ आयंस का अब्जॉर्प्शन होगा और सिक्रेशन होगा. We know in the DCT or in the collecting duct, basically the sodium ions they get reabsorbed. सोडियम आयंस का जो रीअब्जॉर्प्शन होगा वो तभी होगा जब पोटेशियम आयंस का सिक्रेशन होगा. सो टू मेंटेन द रीअब्जॉर्प्शन ऑफ पोटेशियम सोडियम आयन, द पोटेशियम आयन दे रिलीज्ड आउट. ये पोटेशियम आयन जो है वो सिक्रीट आउट कर दिए जाएंगे इन द फिल्ट्रेट टू रीअब्जॉर्ब द सोडियम आयन. पोटेशियम आयन दे सिक्रेटेड आउट इन द DCT एंड द कलेक्टिंग डक्ट रीजन. इस रीजन में इनका सिक्रेशन हो जाएगा. So in the DCT we can say the potassium ion, the hydrogen ion, they get released out. Same way in the collecting duct, when the water this filtrate move into the collecting duct, then also the potassium ion, hydrogen ion, bicarbonate ions and the urea, it can be secreted out. So these parts they are secreting, they are tubular secretion में जो substances release हो रहे हैं in the collecting duct, this is this much. So what amount of the substances will be released or will be secreted, it depends how much amount of what concentration of these substances are present in the blood. According to this, tubular secretion will be happen. As the reabsorption and tubular secretion both process completes, now we can call it urine. So the filtrate which is coming out from the collecting duct after reabsorption and tubular secretion, we can call it urine. So now the urine will come out. So that's about the tubular secretion, where we have seen that main important site of the tubular secretion is DCT and PCT because of the presence of glandular cells which can extract the waste from the blood through the pericardial capillaries. They secrete this waste into the duct filtrate. As they move, filtrate moves down. DCT will also release some substances जो हमने यहाँ पे बताए हैं. After this tubular secretion, finally the filtrate we can call it urine. And this process is not having much more importance in mammalian kidney, whereas it is important in the case of marine fishes and the desert animals, amphibians, where they lack the glomerulus. So tubular secretion is the main process of urine formation in these animals only. That's all about the process of urine formation. In the coming videos, we will discuss about the composition of urine.